When the darkness gathers, and the rain will not cease, and the wind howls every name it's ever known or forgotten, then we turn to family for help and relief.
Welcome, family. Thank you for joining us this evening for Thicker Than Rainwater, our fundraiser for Hurricane Ida relief.
We know that we have a platform and that folks will come when we call sometimes, and we want to use that to help anybody and everybody we can. We have family from Louisiana to Appalachia to everywhere and beyond that these storms have just laid waste and brought devastation. And so if we can use this little platform we built to help our family in Louisiana, to central Appalachia, to anywhere this storm and others have just ravaged our land over the past little bit, we want to do what we can. So we have assembled for you tonight some very special treats, and we have a way of starting things here in the Old Gods of Appalachia family. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Landon Blood.
Hello fam, coming to you from my barn. I'm Landon Blood, and just want to take this opportunity to thank you and everybody at Old Gods for what y'all are doing for us here in Louisiana. We got hit by Ida pretty hard, and we're still recovering from Laura, so we appreciate all the help we can get. On the plus side, Nicholas just rolled through, and rain stopped in time for us to do this. So sorry about the train, but hey, can't rain all the time. The help of friends and family, we'll get back on our feet. We had several requests for the full theme song. I'm going to try to do that for you now. I walk these hills, leave these dark valleys. I can't stay now in the lands alone. In these hills that I walk so often, can feel the winds now on your ghost. I'll sail my boat across these waters to steal my soul. For now I'll walk these roads alone. My soul will sink beneath these waters, so dark and cold. For on this road I'll die alone. For cold wind calls, and so I follow. No time to rest these weary bones. I hear her song, and my heart goes hollow. Best not to walk these woods alone. Best stick to the road, stay out of the shadows. Best get on home. Best to leave them ghosts alone. And the sun goes down the road I travel, the way back home. Whispered as the land still knows. Oh, oh, Lord, child, run. You gotta help me when I'm done. On these hills where the dark heart slumbers, still the only home I'll know. I walk there still, lost in them hollers, just another wandering ghost. Lord, child, run. God, won't you help me when I'm done? My soul will sink beneath these waters, so dark and cold. For on this road I'll die alone. Thank you, fam.
Thank you, Brother Landon. This summer, Steve and I have been working with some voice actors you're going to recognize to produce a brand new Patreon-exclusive series called Blackmouth Dog. Those of you who are Patreon supporters will already recognize the story of Glory Ann Boggs and her family in a part of Virginia called Esau County, and specifically Boggs Holler. Blackmouth Dog, however, takes us back to a teenage Glory Ann Boggs and is set 30 years before the events of Build Mama a Coffin. Blackmouth Dog isn't quite ready for release yet, but for tonight I've prepared a brief vignette that gives you a little introduction and sets the scene for the story of Blackmouth Dog. Steve, take it away.
The girl was not meant to be in the woods alone at night. She wasn't supposed to be in the woods at all. Maggie Bentley's Granny Joan had told her time and again what happened to little uns who wandered off into them woods behind the house. You could get ate up by a bear or a catamount, or just get lost or starve to death, or all kinds of things. But she'd been playing down in the bottom with the Mullins twins, and she'd lost track of time. Next thing she knew, Kizzy and Ira's ma were hollering and the sun was going down, and if Maggie was late for supper, Granny was liable to whoop her backside. The path through the woods might have been dangerous according to her granny, but it was also the fastest. The cleared patch on the top of the ridge where Maggie's daddy had built their stout log cabin when she was little more than a twinkle in her mama's eye was somewhat isolated, and the path down to the road and round the mountain would take a good couple miles longer to walk. Mama used to take in sewing for some of the other ladies around the gap, those with too many kids and not enough time to see to their own mending, and Maggie would walk down with her to pick up or to deliver whatever Mama had been working on. Mama had always taken the path that snaked down through the woods. That had been before, of course. Before Maggie's daddy got conscripted and died his first winter in the army, and Mama took sick, and Granny Joan packed up her 2 cats and came to Esau County to look after them. Well, since Daddy died, Mama didn't get out of bed most days. She took her medicine, but it didn't seem to help much. When Maggie asked about it, Granny laughed and said laudanum wasn't no cure for a broken heart, and she'd best not catch Maggie taking that snake oil, but she never said that within Mama's hearing. She would only ask gently each morning if Mama would like some breakfast with her coffee and whether she was feeling up to helping with the canning today. Oh, Granny Joan loved canning, and she was good at it too. Well, if it hadn't been for Granny, Maggie and Mama might have starved that first winter. She'd come to Esau County in a little cart pulled by an old mule and loaded up with the fruits of her labors, canned taters and turnips and corn and carrots and all manner of jams and jellies, and found their cupboard all but bare and their hearth all but cold. So Granny Joan had ordered them both to bed, which she heaped with quilts, while she carried in split logs from the woodpile and stoked up their fire. Mama had gone to sleep, but Maggie had sat up in bed playing with Granny's 2 cats, Shadow and Mittens, while her grandmother whipped up a veritable feast out of the shining glass jars she'd brought in her little cart as if by magic. Of course, the magic of the jars had lost a little bit of its luster since Maggie had spent the past year or so helping her Granny put up more beans and taters and so on for the next winter, but still, she loved Granny's cooking. Particularly warm bread and butter with Granny's blackberry preserves, which she was likely to be denied if she was late for supper. The sun was going down, and she'd have to hustle if she wanted to make it home before full dark. The fastest route was through the woods, so that's the way Maggie went. She'd been with Mama plenty of times. She knew the way. At least she thought she did. The full dark comes on faster in the woods than it does up on the ridges and the balls or even on the narrow dirt roads of Morgan. As Maggie started up the trail that zigzagged its way through the trees and up and around the side of the mountain, the sun-dappled shadows of leaves reflected on the ground melted into deep pools of darkness. The familiar branches arching overhead seemed to distort, growing long and twisted. In the growing gloom, Maggie could no longer tell oak from sycamore from alder. Was this the tree that marked the right fork in the path, or was that one just ahead? She heard a soft shuffling sound behind her, something sneaking through the underbrush, and Maggie's heart leapt up in her throat. Was it the bears that Granny had warned her about, or a stalking catamount? She froze, tense and wary, but heard nothing more. Stop acting like a baby, she told herself. It hadn't been very loud. It was just a possum or a raccoon, maybe a fox slinking out of its den. At worst, it might be a skunk. Shooey, she'd be in trouble for sure if she got sprayed, but that was all. It was dusk now, time for all evening critters to start stirring. It was not a bear nor a catamount. It couldn't even be a deer. Hadn't sounded big enough. Squaring her shoulders and shaking off her fear, Maggie started forward again, careful to keep the trail through the woods as best she could in the gathering twilight. Finally, she saw what was undoubtedly a familiar landmark, a cluster of large rocks jutting out of the mountainside at the top of the rise just ahead. Beyond that, she knew the path forked left and snaked back up around the mountain toward home. Maggie grinned to herself. She wasn't lost. She knew the way. She could tell her mama, and maybe something snapped behind her with a resounding crack. Not a twig, but something larger. A fallen branch or something, and Maggie heard that shuffling through the dead leaves and brambles, only much louder now, and again she stopped. She listened. Again, that careful, deliberate pacing through the brush, coming closer until she could hear the rough sound of something breathing. And then a low growl, and Maggie broke and ran, plowing up the hill toward the tall stones ahead that she knew marked the way home. She was young, and she was quick, and if she could make it around that bend, she'd be out of sight of whatever it was behind her. Her heart pounded in her ears, and she thought she could hear it panting behind her. That might have been her own ragged breathing as she scrambled up the mountain faster than she'd ever run in her life. The path home through the woods was the shorter route home, but now it seemed so much longer than she remembered. Finally, she reached the rocks, her hand slapping the cold stone as she swung around them. With sudden inspiration, she wriggled into the narrow space behind them, hoping their bulk and the side of the mountain would hide her from whatever critter might be pursuing her. Crouching down as small as she could make herself, she struggled to quiet her gasping breath and listen for the sounds again, straining to hear over the pounding of her own heart in her ears. Silence. Nothing but the gentle chirp of crickets and the wind sighing through the trees. The hunting call of a hoot owl echoed through the night, and Maggie started, but it didn't come again. It was just an old owl. Nothing to be scared of. She took a moment to catch her breath, and then slowly she crept from her hiding place behind the rocks. There was no more shuffling, no breathing but her own. Whatever she heard must not have been chasing her after all. She just scared herself. Remembering Granny's stories about bears and whatnot, now it was coming on full dark, so she had to get home. Granny was going to tan her hide for sure, and Maggie turned to head up the ridge, following the shadow-draped trail mostly by memory now. The moon wasn't up yet, but at least now she could see what little light remained up ahead. A pale orange glow beyond the edge of the tree line. And then suddenly that glow was gone, as something loomed out of the shadows ahead of her. Not a bear, not a catamount. Maggie could make out the pointed ears and shaggy tail of what looked like an enormous black dog. It turned glowing eyes on her, and it began to growl. No one else was on the trail to hear her scream.
Thanks, Steve. Music has always been an important part of setting the scene for Old Gods of Appalachia since basically episode 1. So family, tonight we're joined by Blood on the Harp.
Thank you to our family from Blood on the Harp from Atlanta, Georgia. One of my favorite bands. And when I first started writing and listening to music, creating this show, they were one of the first bands that used to be friends with a former member of theirs. My buddy Russ used to play bass for them. So Blood on the Harp is family. They always will be. And if you know Blood on the Harp through this family, then you probably are a Patreon subscriber because you would know them from Build Mama a Coffin.
Absolutely.
Which their song was the inspiration for that title and so forth. So thank you again, family, for being there. And y'all, we need to talk about why we're here. We've given you a snippet of what's coming on Patreon, but that's not that content money for us isn't what's important right now. What's important is that we are gathered to bring aid to our family who have been just devastated by these horrific storms that have raged. All we have hurricanes hitting the coast, then traveling over land for miles. We got problems.
We've got a lot of problems.
Google HURLEY, Virginia, if you want to see what Hurricane Ida has done to central Appalachia, to our home, to the remote section of Virginia right around the West Virginia border. We need your help. We need your support. So I'm not looking at chat, not going to look at chat at all, but please let those donations roll. I want to let y'all know that these are available. This is my chapbook, Circles of Salt, that I put out in 2015 when I was touring as a slam poet. I think it's okay. I'll be honest with you. I think my work currently is better.
Other people think it's pretty good.
All right. Well, regardless, I have 20 of these in my possession that were part of my touring stock that have just been gathering dust. You can get it on Amazon, but it's print on demand, which means I see like 20 cents of it. You're not really helping anybody. I appreciate it, but you're not really helping anybody. But these 20 copies, the first 15 will go to the first 15 donors pledging $25 or more. Like if you are those donors, we're going to make sure you get a signed, personalized copy coming to your domicile that you have. The other 5 are reserved for the top 5 highest giving donors out of this entire thing, and we'll have to sort it out and get in contact with you and figure that out. But if you want a signed copy of this chapbook, which has this stunning picture of me on the back, looking very authorly and wizened while covered up with blurbs from people that I love, donate, dig deep.
Reach into your hearts and your pocketbooks.
Yep, open them both wide and help out family who really, since we've announced this project, we've gotten emails from teachers in Louisiana, from folks in Appalachia, from folks all over saying like, hey, have you earmarked all that money yet? Hey, could you help us out? So if you look down in the description of this video, you should see links to various folks who are requesting aid. So if you're seeing this on a replay or you missed the live stream where you could give the donations, please look at these lists of GoFundMes, mutual aid accounts, anything and everything you can do. We're going to keep tweeting them out on our social media to make sure this isn't just a one and done situation. We're going to keep pushing this out to get everybody as much as they need. And whatever money we collect, we're doing our best to make sure it goes directly to individual mutual aid. We're not trying to give it to big organizations that are going to take a 30% cut or 50% cut to pay for the coffee they gave out on site. We're working to make sure individual families and people get what they need, and that's what this is for. That's what family is for.
And we, too, will be certainly reaching into our own pocketbooks to donate as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's
goes without saying.
Goes without saying as far as that goes. And I've been in contact with our family down in Louisiana, Landon, and Catalyst Alcindor, one of our consultants and writing buddies, who is helping me find folks down there. I've got folks up in Appalachia, in my own family, helping us track down who to give to in those areas. So please, in the comments down below, if you've got a link, post it. Go ahead. We'll do our best to get it out there for you. So that brings us to this section of the evening. And Cam, it's your favorite character in the world that you.
Oh yes, my favorite. Many of y'all, I know that this is your favorite character.
So when we started this show, the first episode I wrote outside of the prologue was an episode that was meant to be an interlude. It's even labeled as such.
It's labeled as an interlude.
Even though it's 20 plus minutes long for an interlude, which at the time was the standard.
Almost the length of the show.
Yeah. It was an episode called The Witch Queen, episode 0.5, episode 1/2, because I am a moron and I thought I was being clever and no one would ever listen to it. But it has become one of the most beloved episodes of the show. Daughter Dooley, of course, you love her, you want more of her. Believe us, you tell us you want more of her all the time, which is why we dole her out in careful little dollops. But I know that episode sounds different because the show had not found its production stride yet. We were still using very, very basic equipment. I was very sick when I recorded it.
Yeah, that's
was-
one of those you've been talking about re-recording because you listen to it now and you're like, oh, I sound terrible.
Yeah,
I've got a cold.
I had some serious allergies going on. I was teaching full time, meaning I was using my voice all day. I was still screaming in a band. I do believe
too.
when we decided to start producing the show. So I thought it would be kind of cool if, for the first time since 2019, I dug into the vaults and pulled out on paper, weirdly enough, for the first time, a live reading of The Witch Queen, as it would sound if it were produced now. So without further ado, I guess let's give it to Daughter Dooley, The Witch Queen family.
And in these woods, there are two queens. You notice I said woods and not forest. Nobody says forest around here. These are the woods, and you damn well know it. But anyway, the queens. The elder of the two knew the ways of the wild and used them to live far beyond her years, to bend half the land to do her bidding. They say her dwelling sits in the middle of a valley so overgrown that men cannot walk it without being torn to bits by sticky vines and brambles, their blood leaving an easy trail for the greater things that serve her. Her part of the woods smells of the rotten cucumber of copperheads. The air carries the sound of bears popping jaws and every other warning that these woods are not safe. Hanging food from a tree branch will not save it nor you if you are foolish enough to try to camp here. Both will be scented, found, and taken. She watches you here. She is snakebite and mauled bodies. She has never known death and probably never will. Yours will only feed her and make her even younger and full of sap. She is not to be sought, and we call her the Witch Queen. Long before there were towns in the stretch between Kentucky and Virginia, there were settlements and camps. Handholds dug into the side of a mountain scrambling for purchase, desperate church camps and abandoned dog hole mines that more often than not dried up and passed back into the dust without anyone ever noticing. The end of this story starts in a place like that. They called her a witch. They'd found the signs in the books and they'd asked the questions, and she was as guilty as anyone ever was. Problem was that the good people who'd set out to found a religious settlement in what would eventually be Jacob County, Kentucky, called themselves the blessed folk of his unending and undying gracious love. Well, they didn't have the heart for hanging or burning. So she was allowed to gather her things and load them into a cart and be driven into the wilderness to be abandoned to God's unflinching justice. They put a bag over her head to keep her from knowing where she was going. They spun her around 12 times, once for each disciple, to make sure she was good and dizzy, before they loaded her up, and then done the same when they unloaded her, this time saying the Lord's Prayer. You see, they expected her to be one of them, a Bible-beaten sheep that would surely wither and die outside the comfort of their godly encampment, but she was not. She had been raised by her mothers, who brought her across the ocean as a little girl, and she, like her mothers, knew from the ways of the stars in the sky, the plants in the ground, the song of the earth, and like her mothers, she could make a poultice that could close a wound, a draught that would ease your head, and she could make sure more babies made it into this world whole than any physician ever could. Now, it was that last and most valued skill would be what sent her family west. Scandal had erupted on the Virginia coast when the two pretty dark-haired sisters successfully delivered twins to a local official's wife who had lost 3 in childbirth under the watch of the well-known and respectable local doctor. The doctor, in the time-honored tradition of men who had been exposed as incompetent, had promptly called them both witches and called for their blood. And thus Edith and Catherine Dooley had taken their daughter and set out to find a quieter life in the mountains far from the good folks of Williamsburg. They'd found a caravan of kinder and significantly poorer folks making their way to the Cumberland. A week into the mist and rain of the long trek, Edith took sick. Her skin went sallow and her breathing grew wet, and finally she was dead not long after. Upon her death, a pall fell over the whole company. She'd been a bright light on a hard road. Meals were somber, and the talk was scarce for days as to after they buried the bright-eyed girl that everybody called Edie. Catherine, her wife, broken-hearted and malnourished, pressed on with the rest of the party, and her despondency only deepened as she ate less and less. And on the darker nights, she could be heard having full conversations with her beloved Edie, many of which would end with incoherent pleading and sobbing, and when her daughter would run to the place where her mother lay, why, she'd find her dead to the world. The mark of the shadow was clearly on her, though. So when they found Catherine's bedroll empty the morning they were to begin the last push of the trip, no one questioned where she'd gone. There were cliffs and steep drop-offs that were easily enough to get to. They'd never find her body. They just hoped that she was at peace and with her Edie. The company moved on, taking the pair's almost adolescent daughter with them. A quiet, intelligent girl, quick with chores, with gray eyes that saw through most people. Now, you've doubtless noticed we've not said the daughter's name, even though this pretty much is her story. And it's not that we don't want to tell you. Well, we can't, family. Nobody ever wrote it down, and nobody ever passed it down. There's no family Bible, and where this story's going, that's probably for the best. So bear with me now. The Monroe Company, as their little caravan was called, never made it to the Cumberland Gap. Attacks by the inhabitants of the surrounding mountains and sickness picked off the rest of the troop, except for the Dooley's little girl and an old man named Marvin who wouldn't make it much further than that. They almost made it to the Gap when they met up with the good folk, who were on their way west to claim some of that land of tomorrow for themselves. And after Marvin passed on and was given a Christian burial, young daughter Dooley was taken into the fold, where she lived for a year, before they found out how she made Miss Dorothy's leg better with just words and ointment. They found the charm she carried in her bag and the mysterious books that they could not understand. And when the pastor's boy had tried to kiss her after prayer meeting one night, and he come home all scratched up like he met a cattywampus, babbling that girl could change her shape, and she was going to hunt him down and kill him in his sleep because he wouldn't kiss her when she wanted, well, things took a turn. The boy was a liar, of course, as many boys are. She wasn't going to kill him, and she didn't change her shape that much. She just needed him to know that she was not for him. So the next morning, the church elders come for her and named her a witch. Now, this, of course, was something she already knew about herself, but it was nice to have it out in the open. She was left to fend for herself in a deep valley far from a known trail. Some say it was on the eastern side of the Cumberland, closer to what ended up being Glamorgan, Virginia, in Esau County. Others would argue it had to be on the western side in Jacob County, closer to where the kind folk were thought to have died horribly by their own incompetence. Some say you can't find the place where they left her. Some say that place will find you if it wants you there. So they had brought with her the 2 trunks of books and stores that her mother had packed and what clothes she had. When they'd come to her and asked about the things they couldn't understand, she had answered their questions honestly and without fear. Since that day, though, she had not spoken. She stepped off the cart, her head still hooded, and listened as they unloaded all those things into the pitiful little shack they'd built for her. See, the folk were not cruel, and in fact it broke their heart to put her out, but they were faithful and superstitious and stupid, so they did their part. And to their credit, they did not try to keep any of the fine clothes or jewelry from her mother's chests, nor did they try to burn or destroy any of her books. They feared witching far too much for that. So here she was left, and here she set about making a life for herself, alone in the deep wilds of the valley. For a year and a day she fished, she grew a small garden. Well, she knew the ways of the wood, and the ways seemed to know her. As rustic living went, she did all right. The big predators seemed to give her little shack a wide berth, the markers and totems she'd set about her property doing their job quietly. She sang, and she worked, and she crafted, and she danced beneath the moon. Solitude suited her, it seemed, and she burned quietly and brightly with the powers that her mothers left her and taught her, and like all the light that burns, eventually she was seen. Oh, was she seen? The first night was just after the winds had shifted and night started cooling. The moon stood half full when the girl woke to the sound of someone calling her name outside. Lighting a candle and stepping into the darkened yard, she saw a figure walking just outside the boundary she'd marked. At the corner of the land they'd cleared for her domicile, she'd buried small glass jars, each filled with 3 nails from each side of her shack, rubbed in a mixture of her own blood and a few other things we won't talk about. She knew who or whatever this was would not be able to cross. "Hello, my love," said Mama Edie from the other side of the property line. "It's good to see you." Mama Edie's voice held on to a little bit of the old country, and it made her heart ache to see her first mother's face. But she knew that dead was dead, and this was not her ma. Whatever this was, though, it thought it was clever. "Oh, hello, Ma. Been gone a while, have you not?" "Yes, child, we've missed you so. Your Mama Catherine and I, "Oh, you've got to try harder than that," she said, cutting off whatever this was attempt at being her first mother. "You never called Ma Katie anything but Katie since I was born. Psh, Catherine, what are you, her priest? Try again, spirit." And with that she turned, went back in the house, and went to bed. The next night the wind blew colder, and a waxing crescent moon peeked in and out of the passing clouds as the noise at the edge of the yard came again. And she went to see who was there. Ma Katie was sitting beside a fire set right outside of her wards. "Oi, smartass, come over here and help me put this meat on the fire." Sure enough, Ma Katie was struggling with a haunch of spitted meat, unlike anything they'd had since they'd left the Chesapeake. "Oh, I wish I could, Ma, but I've been living hard out here since you left me. My feet and back are all achy and stiff, so why don't you come in and sit a spell? I could make us tea." She smiled archly at Ma Katie, who glowered at her. "Are you completely stupid, spirit? I made sure to think about how Ma Katie would love nothing more than to roast me a bit of lamb all day, and lo, here you are. But you don't know her at all, do you, spirit? Ma Katie couldn't abide lamb. She couldn't have it, couldn't smell it. Made her so sick she'd shit out a Bible, she could. Come back tomorrow. Show me your true face. Or don't come at all." The fire went out, and the lamb and Ma Katie were gone. The next day, the girl took to doubling the number of jars and lines around her home. She marked the door frames with iron nails and dabbed herself with oils from her mother's stores. And the next night, the moon was new. No wind blew. No leaves stirred. She came out of her house and looked toward the dark greens of the valley, the dense tangles of briars and brambles, pickers and stingers, swampy bits with snakes and looming tree shade, thick with spiders. The woods stirred. The sound of something large came to her from deep within the wood. Louder and louder it grew, until the largest buck she'd ever seen pushed out of the trees. Its coat was black as soot. Its hooves were wet with a viscous smearing brown. Its eyes burned with a foul blood-colored light. But the thing she could not look away from were its antlers. They were amber, translucent and honey-colored, pulsing with a low, poisonous smolder, bits of ash falling from them here and there. It came to the edge of her boundary and reared and snorted, its wet hooves snapping it against that invisible barrier. And after a moment, it settled and met her eyes evenly. "Hail, spirit," said she. "Hail, witch." And then, "I am no spirit." pale demon, then," she answered. The thing laughed a laugh that sounded and smelled like drowning. "You have not a name for what I am," it purred. "Some would call me..." And then the thing made a sound that might have been a word, but felt more like a blow, and she flinched away from it. "I come to offer you much, little witch. We see that you have kinship with this land. We see it feed you. We see it keep you safer than the fools who put you here." "Aye," she nodded. "Then you know who and what my mothers were, and what I am. I'm just fine out here. I've drawn my lines and set my house, so there's nothing that I need from you. And don't offer to let me see my ma's again. They're gone. And playing mummers with their faces is just cruel, and it won't get you anywhere. You said you had an offer, so say true, beast, or be gone." The great stag paced the line of her marking. "You speak true, little witch. Dead is dead in this place, to the point that you speak and understand. But what if you never had to know its sting?" "You sound like the church people," she said. "You want me to read your Bible? Sing in your choir?" she teased. The black buck pawed the earth and snorted derisively, its voice rolling back into her head like rancid milk. "There are more books than you could ever read, little witch, and we could give you all of them and more. We have the knowledge of ages. We have power. We have tutors who could teach you things your mothers could never know. More importantly, we could give you this land." "I got land, beast. Don't you see my fine palace and sprawling manor grounds?" She gestured grandly at her humble holdings. The beast chuckled, a vulgar and carnal sound that made her tingle and blush. "You hold this patch for now, child. These lines you've drawn are impressive for one so young, but they will fade with time. All things do. And all we have to do is wait. And we are the very best at waiting. While we waited, though, we would watch you die, whether from age and time, or from the worst things that are coming to this place, things you cannot even imagine. All this splendor, all this beauty ground to ash and blood. We could give you all this land to keep for us, or we could give what was left of you to the land and wait for another like you to come. It might be a while, but as I said, we are the very best at waiting. But no, we will not offer again. She began to sweat then. Her gut told her she was dealing with more than any forest haint, and while that might have tried to trick her at first, it was not lying now. It could wait 1,000 years if it needed to, but it wouldn't. "What would I have to do," she asked, "to live forever and keep this land?" "Come closer," said the thing whose name sounded like Horned Head, but was not. "Let us talk of many things." And that is the story of the Witch Queen as told in episode .5, an interlude. I have not touched this script since 2019. I've never physically held it in my hand until this day. So I hope you enjoyed your trip down memory lane and back into the pages. And if you've caught up all the way through season 2 with the knowledge of what we know about the other queen, maybe some of this hits you just a little bit different now.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you, family. We appreciate you coming out tonight to support this very important cause. Now, just like an old-time sermon, we're not just going to say goodnight and leave. We're going to give you a little musical accompaniment to give you just a few more minutes to pass that collection plate. And so I give you, once again, Mr. Landon Blood.
I'm going to do it one more time, fam. This is old bluegrass cover, Am I Born to Die? And am I born to die? To lay this body down, and as my trembling spirit flies into a world unknown, and as my trembling spirit flies into a world unknown, a land of deepest shade, unpierced by human thought, the dreary region of the dead, where all things are forgot. The dreary region of the dead, where all things are forgot. Soon from the earth I go. What will become of me? Eternal happiness, oh, must then my fortune be. Eternal happiness, oh, must then my fortune be. Thank you once again, fam.
Whew. Brother Landon Blood from down in Louisiana, bringing it to you from his own barn in between storms. Okay, like I know somebody posted on Twitter. We posted that was going to be happening. That's going to summon something. That may have well.
Just summoned something.
But hopefully, it's summoned plenty of you here to be with us this evening. We want to thank everybody for joining us here for Thicker Than Rainwater, our benefit for communities impacted by Hurricane Ida. I want to thank Blood on the Harp, and I want to thank our wonderful mistress Cam Collins for coming on and being on camera with us. And we want to thank all of you who have donated. If you're watching this on a replay, if you didn't hear about this until after it was already live, look down below in the show description. There are going to be links to all kinds of mutual aid and GoFundMe. Please give what you can to help these folks. And I know stuff's hard all around right now, y'all. I'm not pretending like everybody's resting on a dragon's hoard worth of money. I know where the world is. Trust me.
Every dollar counts.
Every dollar counts. Everything you can do to bring back basic living, I would say basic comforts, but just basic living dignity to folks who have been without power, who have been without the ability to cook a hot meal. And again, we're going to make sure everything goes as directly to community aid and people in those communities as possible without a middleman taking a big chunk out of this as much as we can. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I hope you've given, I hope you've given your fair share and can help out these communities in need. And I hope you've enjoyed the material we've shared with you. There'll be more exciting things about old gods to come, but I hope that we've done our part to summon the gods of the good nature of your heart to help out your family. I can't beat this into the ground enough, y'all. People need help. So if you can, please do.
And as always, we'll see you soon, family.
See you real soon.